What truly drives us? Is it survival? Pleasure? Happiness? These are the usual suspects we turn to when trying to explain human motivation. But for the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, none of these go deep enough. Beneath our moral codes, social masks, and rationalizations lies something more primal, more electric. Nietzsche called it the will to power, a force not of passivity or preservation, but of expansion, assertion, and self-overcoming. In his view, we are not merely creatures seeking safety or comfort. We are, at our core, beings striving to exert our influence, define our identity, and shape reality itself. This idea, equal parts thrilling and unsettling, cuts across psychology, politics, art, and ethics. Is the will to power a dark instinct for domination, or a creative principle of growth and transformation? Was Nietzsche outlining a metaphysical law of the universe, or simply offering a psychological insight into what makes us human? These are the questions we'll explore in this video. Welcome to the unfolding journey, where we travel through the great ideas, philosophies, and human stories that shape the world and our place in it. If you're curious about what drives people, not just on the surface, but deep within, you're in the right place. Today, we take a deep dive into Nietzsche's most powerful and controversial concept, the will to power. To understand Nietzsche's concept of the will to power, it helps to first understand Nietzsche himself. Born in 1844, Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher, cultural critic, and classical philologist. His writing style was aphoristic, poetic, and often provocatively ambiguous. He challenged traditional morality, religion, and philosophical conventions with an unmatched intensity. Nietzsche lived through a time of intellectual and spiritual crisis in Europe. The authority of religion was declining, traditional values were unraveling, and the question of how to live, without divine guidance, was becoming more urgent. Nietzsche diagnosed this as the death of God and saw it not just as a theological problem, but as an existential one. It's in this context that the idea of the will to power emerges, not as a casual theory, but as a radical rethinking of what life, value, and meaning are all about. What is the will to power? At its core, Nietzsche's will to power is a claim about the fundamental driving force of life. It is not merely the will to survive or the will to reproduce, as Darwinian biology might suggest. Instead, Nietzsche proposed that the deepest instinct of all living things is the will to expand their power, to overcome resistance, and to assert themselves in the world. In Nietzsche's own words, a living thing seeks above all to discharge its strength. Life itself is will to power. This is not simply about political power or domination over others. Rather, the will to power encompasses a broader idea of growth, ambition, creativity, and self-transcendence. It's the force that drives an artist to create, a thinker to challenge orthodoxy, or a person to rise above their limitations. For Nietzsche, this drive is not optional. It's embedded in the very structure of life. Everything that lives does so by expanding, asserting, and expressing power. But here's where it gets interesting and complicated. One of the major debates surrounding Nietzsche's will to power is this. Was Nietzsche describing a metaphysical principle, a kind of universal law, or simply making a psychological observation about human beings? Some scholars interpret Nietzsche's will to power as a metaphysical doctrine. According to this view, Nietzsche wasn't just talking about people, he was talking about everything. The universe itself is, at its most fundamental level, not made of matter or energy, but of competing wills to power. Every force, every interaction, every structure in the cosmos is an expression of dynamic tension, striving, and transformation. This grand, all-encompassing interpretation echoes Heraclitus's notion that conflict is the father of all things. It positions the will to power as the engine of reality itself, a bold metaphysical claim. However, there's another interpretation, that Nietzsche's will to power is primarily psychological. In this reading, he is not concerned with the structure of the universe, but with the inner workings of human motivation. Here, the will to power is about ambition, creativity, ego, and our desire to impose meaning on a chaotic world. Nietzsche didn't publish a single, systematic explanation of the will to power. In fact, the book titled The Will to Power was compiled posthumously by his sister from scattered notes. And some of those notes are arguably distorted or out of context. This has led to significant scholarly debate. But perhaps Nietzsche wanted it this way. Like much of his philosophy, the will to power resists being pinned down. It's not a neat formula, it's a provocation, an invitation to look deeper. What does it mean to say that humans are driven by a will to power? Nietzsche rejected the idea that human beings are primarily rational creatures or moral agents bound by universal laws. He saw these concepts as social constructs, often rooted in religious or ideological frameworks meant to suppress the will to power. For Nietzsche, morality, especially the Judeo-Christian kind, was a way for the weak to control the strong. He famously criticized what he called slave morality, which praises humility, obedience, and meekness. In contrast, master morality arises from strength, pride, and the affirmation of life. In this sense, the will to power becomes a lens through which Nietzsche critiques culture, ethics, and human behavior. He urges us to move beyond conventional morality and instead embrace self-overcoming, the process of transcending one's limitations and becoming what one is. It's this vision of transformation that underpins Nietzsche's ideal of the Übermensch, or Overman, a being who creates new values, who says yes to life in all its chaos and suffering, and who embodies the will to power in its most creative form. It's important to dispel a common misconception. The will to power is not just about domination or control over others. Nietzsche warns against reducing it to a crude political principle. In many cases, power can be exerted through creation, not conquest. The artist who paints, the thinker who philosophizes, the athlete who pushes their limits. These are also expressions of the will to power. They demonstrate power not by crushing opposition, but by achieving excellence, innovation, and authenticity. Thus, the will to power is not inherently violent or destructive. It can be joyful, life-affirming, and deeply human. It's the energy that drives us to grow, to improve, to craft meaning from existence. Nietzsche's idea is undeniably powerful, but it's also controversial. Critics argue that the will to power glorifies egotism, undermines compassion, and paves the way for nihilism or authoritarianism. Some see Nietzsche's concept as a dangerous justification for selfishness or oppression. Nietzsche anticipated these critiques. He knew that power, like fire, could warm or consume. But he believed that avoiding power struggles altogether was impossible, and possibly even dishonest. Every ideology, he argued, hides a will to power. Even the ones that claim to be about love, peace, or equality often mask deeper drives. Still, Nietzsche's challenge remains. Can we acknowledge the will to power without falling into tyranny? Can we channel it toward creativity, growth, and excellence instead of domination? These are not easy questions, but they are perhaps necessary ones. Though Nietzsche wrote in the 19th century, his insights feel remarkably modern. In psychology, we see echoes of the will to power in the works of Freud, Adler, and even contemporary theories of motivation and self-actualization. Alfred Adler, in particular, proposed the striving for superiority as a key psychological drive, a clear nod to Nietzsche's influence. In politics and culture, we witness the will to power in movements for identity, autonomy, and creative self-expression. From social media influencers crafting their personal brands to activists demanding systemic change, the urge to be seen, to matter, to influence, the will to power is everywhere. Even in science and technology, we might see the will to power at work in the relentless push to innovate, disrupt, and extend human capabilities beyond their current limits. Nietzsche's concept, in this way, isn't just a relic of 19th century philosophy. It's a living idea, one that pulses through our society, our choices, and our very being. In the end, Nietzsche's will to power is not a tidy moral lesson or a step-by-step guide to success. It is a mirror, a way to see ourselves more honestly. To live according to the will to power is not to seek domination over others, but to pursue self-overcoming, to become stronger, more courageous, more alive. It is to face the abyss of existence and still choose to create, to strive to affirm life. It is, in Nietzsche's terms, to say a defiant yes to the world in all its beauty and brutality. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Unfolding Journey. If you found this exploration of Nietzsche's will to power compelling, we hope you'll stick with us as we continue to explore the philosophies that shape how we live, think, and become. We believe that ideas are journeys, and they're best taken together. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments. What does the will to power mean to you? Is it a force for good, danger, or something in between? Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep unfolding the journey.